Welcome to Sonara's Deep Dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're trying to get a clearer picture of a religion that's often misunderstood, Wicca. It's spent decades kind of hidden, often sensationalized.
That's absolutely right. I think when people hear Wicca, the images that pop into their heads are often, well, not quite accurate. They don't reflect the structured traditions or the theology or even the ethics behind it.
Yeah, the pop culture version is pretty pervasive.
It is. But our sources today really let us dig deeper. We're looking at foundational texts, historical work on figures like, say, Margaret Murray, and detailed breakdowns of rituals, both the traditional coven stuff and how solitary practitioners work today.
So our mission here is to cut through those stereotypes. We want to really explore Wicca's history, its core belief in two deities, the horned god and the triple goddess, and how their ceremonies connect people to the earth cycles.
And we'll look at the difference between those established traditions, like Gardnerian Wicca, tracing back to Gerald Gardner himself, and the more personalized path that's become so common now, eclectic Wicca.
Okay, let's lay the groundwork. To really get Wicca today, we have to accept it's fundamentally modern, right? Even if it uses ancient ideas. Its public story starts mid-20th century. So where do we begin tracing this complex path?
Officially, the starting pistol fires in 1954. That's when the Witchcraft Act was repealed in Britain. And the key figure, the one everyone points to, is Gerald Gardner.
Right, the retired civil servant.
Exactly. Gardner was deep into Western esotericism, various occult groups, and he essentially assembled Wicca from this huge patchwork of existing stuff. It wasn't created out of thin air.
What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Oh, a real mix. You got 19th century occultism, the structured degrees you see in Freemasonry, bits of ceremonial magic, folk magic traditions, and importantly, influences from people like Aleister Crowley.
Crowley. Okay, his stuff, Thelema, feels quite distinct usually. How did that feed into Gardner's new religion?
Well, Thelema's core idea, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, definitely echoes in Wicca's philosophy. Though, crucially, Wicca immediately adds that harm none clause the read.
Ah, okay. A major qualifier.
A huge qualifier.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, Gardner was actually an initiate in Crowley's group, the OTO Ordo Templi Orientis. And a lot of the early Wiccan ritual structure, the focus on specific tools like the athame and wand, the 3-degree system for initiation, that looks very similar to ceremonial magic structures Crowley used.
So it shows how Wicca is really an invented tradition, like you said, borrowing what worked ritually.
Precisely. It's a modern construct, taking functional elements from various sources. But it wasn't just Gardner piecing things together. Someone else was vital in making it coherent.
Doreen Valiente.
Absolutely. Her contribution in the 1950s was massive. Gardner's initial writings were a bit sparse, maybe disjointed. Valiente was a talented writer, a poet. She refined it, added clarity, gave it a stronger theological voice. A lot of the core material in the Gardnerian Book of Shadows, that's heavily influenced by her work.
She turned a collection of ideas into a workable religion.
Pretty much. Made it something that could survive, grow, and even be published eventually.
Yeah.
But there's a tension here. The core claim that Wicca was ancient, a surviving religion that was built on something shaky.
This is where Margaret Murray comes in.
Exactly. Murray was an Egyptologist, and in 1921 she proposed her witch cult hypothesis.
The idea that the European witch trials weren't about devil worship.
Right. She argued those persecuted were actually followers of a vast, secret, pre-Christian fertility religion that had survived underground. And the key part of her theory: this cult supposedly worshipped a single, central, horned god.
A theory that modern historians really don't buy anymore.
Not at all. Historians see her work now as, well, deeply flawed, based on selective evidence, misinterpretations of trial records. But for Gerald Gardner, it was gold.
It gave him the perfect origin story.
It absolutely did. It was the foundational myth he needed for Gardnerian Wicca. It let him claim he wasn't inventing something new, but revealing this genuine, ancient, nature-based cult that had survived in secret. It gave the religion instant historical depth, even if that history wasn't, strictly speaking, accurate.
So the mythology is deliberately, maybe strategically, historically inaccurate to serve its own needs.
In a sense, yes. The historical accuracy wasn't the main point for its religious function.
But why would traditional Wiccan lines, the ones tracing back to Gardner, still sort of uphold that narrative, even symbolically, if it's known to be flawed?
That's a great question. For British Traditional Wicca, or BTW, keeping that Murray narrative alive, even if just symbolically, reinforces the idea of lineage. of secrecy. It builds a very strong, exclusive identity, like they're the heirs to this ancient persecuted priesthood.
So the focus shifts from literal history to spiritual truth.
Exactly. It represents the continuous presence of nature spirituality surviving despite centuries of opposition. It's a powerful story for defining who they are, historically accurate or not.
Okay, this seems like a good point to clarify some terms. We hear Wicca, witchcraft, neo-paganism thrown around. How do they actually relate?
Good idea. So neo-paganism is the biggest umbrella term. It covers all sorts of modern movements that revive or draw inspiration from historical pagan beliefs. Think Druidry, heathenry, and Wicca too.
So Wicca is one type of neo-paganism.
Yes, a specific, usually duotheistic religion within that broader neo-pagan movement. And it's arguably the largest and most influential form today.
And where does witchcraft fit in? Is it the same as Wicca?
No, not necessarily. Witchcraft, often called the craft, is the actual practice doing magic, casting spells, working with energies. Historically, it was often linked to folk traditions, sometimes rebellion against the status quo.
Wicca includes witchcraft.
Yes. Modern Wicca is often described as a magico-religion. The practice of magic is integral to the faith. So you could say all Wiccans practice witchcraft, but not everyone who practices witchcraft follows the specific theology and ethics like the Wiccan rite of Wicca.
You could be a folk witch doing your own thing without being Wiccan.
Precisely. But you can't really be Wiccan without engaging in the craft in some way.
The structures differ too, right? You mentioned traditions earlier.
Big differences. The main split is between the initiatory traditions and the non-initiatory ones. British Traditional Wicca, BTW, is the umbrella for the initiatory lines. This includes Gardnerian Wicca, founded by Gardner, and Alexandrian Wicca, founded later by Alex Sanders.
And what defines BTW?
Strict lineage. You have to be initiated by someone who was initiated, tracing back eventually to Gardner or Sanders. It's oath-bound, meaning initiates take vows of secrecy about certain rituals and knowledge. They tend to view the term Wicca quite narrowly, applying it mainly to themselves.
How do Gardnerian and Alexandrian differ specifically? Are they very distinct?
The core beliefs are very similar: the god and goddess, the wheel of the year, the reed. Alexandrian Wicca, emerging in the 1960s, tends to be maybe a bit more eclectic, sometimes more theatrical in its rituals. Alex Sanders had a background in high ceremonial magic, and you can sometimes see that influence.
It's like in the style of ritual.
Yeah, perhaps more elaborate robes sometimes, or incorporating deity names from a wider range of pantheons, seeing the core god and goddess as universal archetypes. Both traditions traditionally practice skyclad, meaning nude, in rituals.
Skyclad. Why nude?
It symbolizes equality, stripping away social status and ego, returning to a natural state, pure before the gods. But even within that, Alexandrian practice might sometimes incorporate more ceremonial elements alongside or instead of full nudity.
Okay, so that's the tight, secretive, lineage-based world. But that's not what most people encounter today, is it?
Not at all. The most common form, especially in the US, is eclectic Wicca. Its rise since the 1970s has been huge.
What defines eclectic?
Personalization. Eclectic Wiccans typically aren't initiated into a traditional lineage. They often work alone, they're solitary practitioners, they build their own unique path, drawing inspiration from various sources they connect with. Maybe they focus on Celtic deities, but incorporate meditation techniques from Buddhism, for example.
Driven by books and now the internet.
Absolutely. Authors played a huge role in codifying self-dedication rituals and providing frameworks for solitary practice. This really opened the floodgates, meeting a massive public appetite for personalized, experiential spirituality outside of traditional institutions. It's definitely the most visible and likely the largest form of Wicca today.
Okay, so despite those big structural differences between, say, Gardnerian and eclectic paths, there's a unifying theology at the core, right? This duotheism.
Yes, the veneration of both a god and a goddess. Usually conceptualized as the horned god and the triple goddess, they're seen as complementary forces, perfectly balanced, male and female energies working together. That balance is absolutely central to Wiccan cosmology.
Like yin and yang, almost.
Very much like that. Life and death, light and dark, sky and earth. They embody that dynamic interplay. And interestingly, while it's dualistic, the way Wiccans view these deities can be nuanced. It's often described as henotheistic or sometimes pantheistic.
Could you break that down for us? Henotheistic versus pantheistic.
Sure. So pantheistic would mean seeing the god and goddess not as distinct personalities, but more as impersonal universal forces. Facets of one single, all-encompassing divine reality that exists in everything. The divine is the universe, essentially.
And henotheistic?
Henotheism is a bit different. A henotheistic Wiccan might primarily worship the great goddess and the great horned god as the main focus. But they'd understand these figures as universal archetypes that contain within them the aspects of all other gods and goddesses from different pantheons.
So the goddess could be seen as Isis one day, Diana the next, depending on the need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She might manifest or be invoked using different names and aspects, say Artemis for independence, Demeter for nurturing, but they're all seen as faces of the one great goddess. It allows for a lot of flexibility while maintaining that core dual structure.
Let's focus on the feminine side first. The triple goddess, also called the Lady.
Yes, the Lady is a common title. She's fundamentally linked to the earth, the moon, the tides, fertility, intuition. The source of all life, really. And her power is often understood through her three main aspects: maiden, mother, and crone.
The life cycle.
Precisely. The maiden represents youth, new beginnings, potential, enchantment. Think the waxing moon. The mother embodies maturity, fertility, nurturing, stability, abundance, the full moon. And the crone represents wisdom, endings, transformation, death, and eventually rebirth, the waning or dark moon.
So death isn't seen as a final end.
Not at all. It's a necessary phase in a continuous cycle. The crone aspect ensures that endings are understood as transitions, leading back to new beginnings. This whole cycle is central to Wiccan understanding of time and life, especially as reflected in the Wheel of the Year. She's often particularly honored during Esbats, the lunar celebrations.
Okay, now for her counterpart, the horned god, the Lord. You mentioned his image has suffered historically.
Hugely. The horns, of course, got conflated with the Christian devil. But in Wicca, he represents the masculine principle of nature. The wild, the hunt, the sun's energy, life force, the sky. To really grasp the Wiccan horned god, you have to see him as this layered creation, an evolutionary synthesis.
He wasn't just plucked fully formed from one ancient source.
Definitely not. He's probably the most syncretic, most assembled figure in Wicca. There are clear ancient inspirations, of course.
Like who?
Two main ones stand out. First, the Celtic god Cernunnos. You see him on ancient carvings like the Gundestrup cauldron or the Pillar of the Boatmen depicted with stag antlers. He's associated with animals, the wilderness, fertility, sometimes wealth, a powerful master of nature.
And the second?
The Greco-Roman god Pan. The satyr-like figure, goat-legged, horned, associated with shepherds, music, wild places, and that kind of untamed, sometimes chaotic natural energy, even panic.
So these ancient figures provided the visual cues, the horns, the connection to the wild?
They established the archetype, the visual language. Then came that intellectual, albeit controversial bridge we talked about earlier.
Margaret Murray again.
Right. Her theory essentially took figures like Cernunnos and Pan, mashed them together, and claimed they were all aspects of this single surviving witch god worshipped by her alleged pre-Christian cult. A figure deliberately demonized by Christianity, turning his natural symbols like horns and hooves into marks of evil.
Historically shaky, but theologically useful for Gardner.
Exactly. It provided the justification. Gardner took Murray's idea of this singular horned god, this witch god, and formally incorporated him into his new duotheistic system as the consort to the triple goddess.
So how does this synthesized horned god function within Wiccan practice, particularly the Wheel of the Year?
He embodies the annual solar cycle, the cycle of active life, death, and rebirth. He's typically seen as being born at the winter solstice, Yule, gaining strength as the sun waxes. He reaches maturity, unites with the goddess in sacred marriage around Beltane, symbolizing peak fertility in life. And then, as the year wanes, he sacrifices himself. His energy diminishes, like a dying sun. He dies around Samhain, descending into the underworld, only to be reborn again at Yule. His story is the engine of the seasonal cycle.
Complementary to the goddess.
Entirely. She represents the enduring earth, the moon, the cycles of life within herself. He's the active force, the sun's energy, the spark that waxes and wanes upon the earth. Together, they create the whole picture. It comes back to that core idea of balance, that Hermetic principle. As above, so below. The cycles of the cosmos mirrored in the deities and on earth.
Okay, let's shift to the guiding principles for practitioners. Wicca is often described as life-affirming, focused on intent and taking responsibility for your actions. This brings us to the most famous Wiccan principle.
The Wiccan Rede. And it harm none, do what you will.
It sounds simple, but unpack that. Do what you will sounds like total freedom.
It grants enormous freedom, yes. But it's immediately balanced by that huge caveat, and it harm none. That means if it harms no one. So, you have freedom as long as your actions don't cause harm. It puts a responsibility squarely on the individual practitioner to consider the consequences of their actions.
It's an internal guide, not external commandments.
Precisely. Unlike, say, the Ten Commandments, which are external rules from a deity, the Rede requires constant self-reflection and ethical judgment.
That harm none. That seems difficult, impossible even. Just living involves some level of harm, eating plants, swatting a mosquito. How do Wiccans navigate that?
That's the philosophical core of Wiccan ethics. Harm none is generally understood as an ideal to strive for, not an absolute literal command that's achievable in every single instance. It means you should actively try to minimize harm.
So intention matters.
Intention is huge. And awareness. If harm is unavoidable, like, say, eating meat for survival or defending oneself, it should be done consciously, respectfully, and with an understanding of the necessity. It's about making ethical choices constantly, not following a rigid rule that ignores context. The weight is on your conscience.
And reinforcing that personal accountability is another key idea. The rule of three.
Yes, the threefold law. This belief states that whatever energy, good or bad, positive or negative, you send out into the universe through your actions, especially magical actions, will return to you magnified, usually threefold.
A kind of metaphysical karma?
Sort of, yeah. It acts as a very powerful incentive for ethical behavior, especially in magic. If you hex someone, you risk getting that negativity back 3 times worse. If you do good, that positive energy returns amplified. It really makes you think twice before acting, especially when working magic. The Rede gives freedom. The rule of 3 underscores the consequences.
And underlying both of these seems to be a deep connection to the natural world.
Absolutely fundamental. Wicca is a nature religion at its heart. Respect for the earth, ecological awareness, seeing the divine in nature, it's all woven into the practice. Rituals often take place outdoors if possible, or bring natural elements inside. There's often a sense of being stewards of the planet.
Which explains why the main cycles of worship follow the sun and moon. Let's talk about Esbats and Sabbats.
Right, these are the 2 main types of ritual gatherings. Esbats are the lunar celebrations. They're typically held on the full moon, though sometimes the new moon as well. So you have about 12 or 13 Esbats a year.
And what's the focus of Esbats?
They're primarily focused on the goddess in her full, pertinent aspect. And critically, Esbats are the main time for practical magical workings, raising energy for healing, divination, spellcasting for personal needs or for the group. The full moon's energy is seen as ideal for constructive magic, for bringing things into being.
Okay, so Esbats are lunar magical work. What about Sabbats?
The Sabbats follow the solar cycle. There are 8 major festivals spread throughout the year, forming the Wheel of the Year. These mark the turning points of the seasons and celebrate the life cycle of the horned god Huhen, his birth, growth, union with the goddess, death, and rebirth.
Less focus on spellcasting.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
Sabbats tend to be more about mythology, community, feasting, meditation, and honoring the specific energies of that point in the seasonal cycle, celebrating the story of the god and goddess as it unfolds through the year.
Let's quickly run through the 8 Sabbats. You can group them, right?
Yes, they fall into 2 groups. First, the 4 cross-quarter festivals, also called the Greater Sabbats. These often have Celtic roots and are considered major turning points.
What are they?
You have Samhain around October 31st and November 1st. This is the witch's new year, marking the final harvest, the death of the god, and when the gale between worlds is thinnest. It's a time for honoring ancestors and introspection.
The modern Halloween has roots here.
Deep roots, yes. Then comes Imbolc, around February 1st, a festival of purification, the first stirrings of spring, often associated with light, candles, and inspiration. Think Bridget.
Next.
Beltane, around May 1st. May Day. This is the peak of spring fertility, celebrating the union of the god and goddess, the sacred marriage. Lots of joy, bonfires, maypoles, celebrating life.
And the last cross-quarter?
Lunicide, or sometimes Lammas, around August 1st. The first harvest festival, giving thanks for the grain, acknowledging the necessary sacrifice of the grain god for life to continue.
Okay, those are the 4 Greater Sabbats. What's the other group?
The 4 solar stations, or lesser Sabbats. These are the solstices and equinoxes, the astronomical turning points.
So we have
Winter solstice, or Yule, around December 21st. The longest night. It celebrates the rebirth of the sun god, the promise of returning light.
then the spring equinox.
Spring equinox, or Ostara, around March 21st. Day and night are equal length. It's all about balance, new life bursting forth, fertility, potential. Think eggs and rabbits, symbols of fertility.
Summer solstice.
Summer solstice, or Letha, around June 21st. The longest day, the sun at its peak strength. A celebration of light and abundance, but also acknowledging the turning point. The days will now start getting shorter.
And finally, autumn equinox.
Autumn equinox, or Mabon, around September 21st. Again, day and night are equal. The second harvest, a time of thanksgiving, balance, sharing the bounty, and preparing for the darker half of the year.
So this Wheel of the Year provides a constant repeating structure that connects practitioners directly to the Earth's natural rhythm.
Exactly. It makes the spiritual path very grounded, very embodied in the environment around you.
Okay, let's zoom in now on the more structured, traditional side, British traditional Wicca, the coven-based path.
Yeah.
This seems much more formalized, oath-bound, reliant on that lineage we talked about.
It is. BTW traditions like Gardnerian and Alexandrian operate with a high degree of structure, detailed in their traditional texts, often called the Book of Shadows. And central to this structure is the 3-degree system of initiation.
Like levels of advancement.
Sort of, yeah. It's a ladder of spiritual growth, but also increasing responsibility within the coven and the tradition. Before you even get to the 1st degree, there's usually an apprenticeship period, traditionally a year and a day, for study and getting to know the coven.
And what happens at that 1st degree initiation? It sounds intense.
It is. It's designed as a ritual of symbolic death and rebirth. The candidate, or postulant, goes through purification rites. They take a solemn oath of secrecy, which is really core to BTW identity. They might be symbolically bound and challenged, representing overcoming obstacles.
And there's a specific blessing.
Yes, the ceremony often culminates in the 5-fold kiss. The high priestess or high priest gives a series of 5 kisses to the feet, knees, womb area or genitals, breasts, and lips, accompanied by blessings. It's a very intimate ritual, acknowledging the sacredness of the body as a vessel for the divine. It marks formal entry into the coven and the priesthood.
What about the higher degrees, 2nd and 3rd?
The 2nd degree marks a deeper level of understanding and grants the initiate the ability to act as high priestess or high priest, perhaps leading rituals, but usually still under the guidance of the coven leaders who initiated them.
And the 3rd?
The 3rd degree is the highest level. It signifies full mastery within that tradition and, crucially, grants the authority to leave the original coven to hive off and form a new autonomous coven. This is how the lineage is passed down and the tradition expands.
Let's talk about the rituals themselves. How does a coven actually prepare and conduct a ceremony, say for an esbat or sabbat?
Preparation is key. The space needs to be ritually cleansed first. This might involve sweeping, smudging with incense like sage, or asperging with consecrated salt water. Then comes casting the circle.
The magic circle, how is that done?
Usually with the atham, the ritual knife, or sometimes a wand. The high priestess or priest will trace the boundary of the circle, typically about 9 feet across, visualizing a sphere of protective energy forming. This circle is considered sacred space between the worlds, a safe container for magic.
What happens once they're inside this protected space?
The next step is typically invoking the guardians of the 4 cardinal directions, or quarters east, air, south fire, west water, north earth, and calling upon the god and goddess to be present. Then often the main work begins, which might involve raising energy.
The cone of power, you mentioned that earlier. What exactly is that?
The cone of power is basically a collective psychic energy construct. The coven members work together to build up magical energy through focused activities.
Like what?
Chanting, drumming, dancing, deep rhythmic breathing, intense visualization, all done in unison. The idea is that this energy builds and rises. Often visualize this swirling upwards into a cone shape above the circle.
And then what do they do with this energy?
Once the energy reaches its peak, the high priestess and indoor priest direct it towards the specific goal of the ritual. Maybe sending healing to someone, charging an amulet, or consecrating tools. Then the energy is released, sent out from the apex of the cone to do its work.
After the main energy work, there's something called drawing down the gods.
Yes, often drawing down the moon for the goddess, or drawing down the sun for the god. This is a very profound part of some traditional rituals. The high priestess, for example, might invoke the goddess with the intention of allowing the deity's presence to temporarily inhabit her body.
Like a form of channeling.
In a way, yes. If successful, the high priestess then speaks as the goddess, delivering what's called the charge, or offering wisdom and guidance directly to the coven. It's considered a direct communion with the divine. A similar rite can be done by the high priest for the god.
Then there's the great rite, the hieroskamos. This sounds like the ritual centerpiece, symbolizing that core duality.
It absolutely is. Hieroskamos means sacred marriage or sacred union. It symbolizes the mystical union of the goddess and the god, the ultimate creative act, the source of all fertility, both spiritual and physical. It's seen as generating immense magical power.
How is this usually performed in a coven setting?
Almost always, in contemporary BTW practice, the Great Rite is performed symbolically. It's done in token. This typically involves the high priest taking the athem, representing the masculine principle, the phallus, fire,
Right, the ritual knife.
and plunging it into the chalice, held by the high priestess, which represents the feminine principle, the womb, water. This symbolic act enacts the divine union and consecrates the wine or juice in the chalice.
And that consecrated drink is then shared.
Yes, often as part of the cakes and ale ceremony that usually follows the main ritual work.
Yeah.
Sharing simple food and drink helps ground the energy, fosters community, before the circle is formally closed and dismissed.
The distinction needs to be made. Is it ever performed literally?
Our sources indicate that yes, within some very traditional, high-level third-degree context, the Great Rite can potentially be performed literally, meaning actual sexual intercourse between the high priest and high priestess. However, this is stated to be extremely rare, highly private, and reserved for specific major magical workings. It's definitely not the norm. The symbolic version is the standard practice you'd encounter.
Good to clarify that. Finally, let's touch on the tools used in these rituals. They seem important.
They are. Tools act as focal points, helping to direct the practitioner's will and energy. They need to be consecrated to align them with magical purpose.
The most prominent seems to be the athem.
The athem, the black-handled ceremonial knife, is arguably the most important personal tool. It represents the element of fire, or sometimes air, the projective active will. Crucially, as we said, it's not for physical cutting. It's used to cast the circle, direct energy, invoke, and banish.
What other key tools are there?
You have the wand, often associated with air or fire, also used for directing energy, perhaps more gently than the athem. The chalice, representing water, the receptive feminine principle, the goddess's womb, used for holding ritual drinks. And the pentacle, a flat disc, usually wood or metal, inscribed with a pentagram.
What's the pentacle for?
It represents the element of earth. It's used on the altar as a place to ground energy or to consecrate other items, like the cakes and ale.
There are others too, right? Like a white-handled knife.
Yes, the boline, that is used for practical cutting herbs, cords, carving symbols into candles. You also often see a censer for burning incense, representing air, maybe a lamp, or candles for light, fire, salt, earth, water. It all creates a microcosm.
It really reinforces that as above, so below idea. The tools, the elements, the actions within the circle mirroring the cosmos.
Exactly. The ritual space becomes a map of the universe, and the practitioner stands at the center, connecting the realms.
Okay, we've explored the highly structured, traditional coven world. But as you said, most people drawn to Wicca today encounter it differently. Through books, online, working alone. How does the solitary path compare?
It's a huge shift, really a democratization of the practice. The biggest difference is where the energy and authority come from. A coven has group energy, shared knowledge, validation from initiated leaders. The solitary practitioner relies almost entirely on their own intuition, their personal connection to the divine, and the energy they can raise themselves.
Do solitaries perform initiations?
They often perform self-dedication rituals. After a period of study, off that traditional year and a day is still observed as a mark of seriousness, they might perform a personal ritual to formally commit themselves to the path, to the god and goddess, and to the principles of Wicca. It's a personal claiming of the identity, rather than receiving it from a lineage.
What are the specific challenges for someone working alone without that coven support system?
Raising sufficient magical energy by yourself can be demanding. That cone of power we talked about. Much easier with 13 people chanting than just one. Also, vetting information is crucial. In a coven, the high priestess might correct misunderstandings. Solitaries have to be discerning researchers, cross-referencing books and online sources carefully.
So how do they compensate? How do they build the necessary focus and power?
They usually dedicate significant time and effort to developing personal power through internal disciplines. It's less about external group dynamics and more about inner cultivation.
What kind of disciplines are we talking about?
Meditation and visualization are absolutely foundational. Grounding meditation is a common practice. Visualizing roots growing down from your feet into the earth, drawing up stable energy, and releasing any excess or negativity. It centers you before doing any ritual or spell work.
And visualization?
Guided visualizations are used constantly. For example, creating detailed mental images to build a protective shield of light around yourself before magic. Or vividly imagining the desired outcome of a spell as if it's already happened, to help manifest it.
Are there physical techniques involved too?
Yes. Chanting is very common for solitaries. Repeating sacred names, words of power, or affirmations helps raise vibrational energy and maintain focus, shutting out distractions. And rhythmic breathing is key. Controlling the breath controls the flow of prana, or life force energy. Learning specific breathing patterns helps draw in power, focus it with intention, and then release it effectively during spellcasting.
Okay, so this internal work builds the foundation for the actual practice of magic or spellcraft. How is magic typically defined in Wicca?
The classic definition, often attributed to Aleister Crowley but widely adopted, is something like, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will.
Change in conformity with will, not necessarily supernatural.
Not in the sense of violating natural laws. It's more about understanding and directing subtle natural energies within yourself, within nature, using focused intention to create a desired change. It's seen as working with the currents of the universe, not against them.
What does a solitary practitioner need for effective spellcasting? What are the key ingredients, so to speak?
Okay, first and foremost, clear intent. You have to know exactly what you want to achieve. Vague intentions lead to weak or unpredictable results. Energy flows where intention goes, as the saying goes. You need sharp focus.
Makes sense. What else?
Second, timing. Aligning your spell with the right cosmic energies is considered crucial for boosting its effectiveness. This often involves the lunar cycle.
Waxing and waning moon.
Exactly. Spells for increase, growth, drawing things to you like love, money, healing are best done during the waxing moon as it grows towards full. Spells for decrease, banishing, letting go, cleansing those are done during the waning moon as it shrinks towards dark.
Are other timings considered?
Yes. Many also consider planetary hours or days of the week. For instance, doing a love spell on a Friday, associated with Venus, or a prosperity spell on a Thursday, Jupiter. It's about adding layers of supportive energy.
Okay, intent, timing. What's next?
Third, supplies and correspondences. While magic comes from within, physical items help focus intention. Solitaries choose tools and ingredients, candles, herbs, crystals, oils based on their traditional magical correspondences.
Meaning what the item represents energetically.
Right. Green candles or aventurine crystals for prosperity, rose quartz or pink candles for love, lavender for peace or sleep, rosemary for protection and clarity. You choose items whose inherent energy resonates with your spell's goal. These items are usually cleansed and consecrated before use.
And finally,
Fourth, incantation. The spoken word is powerful. Whether it's a traditional rhyming spell, a simple affirmation, or just speaking your intention clearly from the heart, the words need to be charged with emotion and belief. The incantation helps shape and direct the energy you've raised.
this also extends to making things like potions or charms.
Absolutely. Creating potions, which might be herbal infusions, oils, or brews, involves charging the liquid with intent under specific ritual conditions. Making charms, like mojo bags filled with corresponding herbs and stones, or enchanting a piece of jewelry, creates a physical object imbued with magical energy that the person can carry with them.
So it's a very hands-on, personalized process.
Very much so. For the solitary, it's all about personal connection, focused will, ethical consideration, remembering the read, and working with the natural energies available to them.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. We went from Margaret Murray's somewhat shaky historical theory through Gerald Gardner creating this formal system with the god and goddess, exploring the split between the traditional covens and the much more widespread solitary path today.
Yeah, and we looked at the core principles that balance between freedom and responsibility in the read, the cycles of the wheel of the year, the detailed rituals like the Great Rite.
What really strikes me is how adaptable Wicca has been, how it shifted from that very secretive initiatory model to something so personalized and accessible.
It really speaks to a powerful need people felt. The original tight structure just couldn't contain the explosion of interest, especially from the 70s onwards. It had to evolve to meet that demand.
Yeah.
And yet, even in its modern forms, you still see echoes of that deep ceremonial structure, the circle, the elements, the focus on deity.
This brings us back to that fascinating tension between history and invention, doesn't it? The practice clearly feels ancient and connected to nature for people.
It does, and the connection to nature cycles is undeniably real and powerful.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder.
Okay.
We talked about the 8 Sabbats, the Wheel of the Year. Now, the 4 cross-quarter festivals, Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh, those names have genuine ancient roots, mostly Celtic. But the other 4, the names commonly used today for the solstices and equinoxes.
Yule, Ostara, Litha,
Exactly. Those names Ostara, Letha, and Mabon, which sounds so ancient and evocative. They were actually researched, chosen, and popularized largely by one American Wiccan author, Aidan Kelly, relatively recently, around 1970. Wait, 1970? That's only about 20 years after Gardner really introduced Wicca publicly.
Pretty much. So some of the very language used to describe the sacred calendar, the words that feel timeless to many practitioners today, are themselves quite modern inventions within the Wiccan context.
That's fascinating. So what does that tell us?
I think it powerfully reinforces the idea we touched on earlier. The real power of Wicca, for many, doesn't necessarily lie in proving an unbroken chain back to prehistory or in the ancientness of a specific name.
It's more about the practice itself.
It seems to be. It's about the intention, the conscious act of aligning yourself with the observable cycles of the sun, the moon, the seasons right here and now. It's about the commitment to living ethically, guided by that personal responsibility and the focused power of your own will. That connection, that commitment, that's what seems to give the practice its depth and resonance, regardless of whether the label you use for a festival is 10 years old or 2000.
A truly deep dive into a path that's both intentionally constructed and continuously evolving. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for tuning into Zsuzsanna's Deep Dive. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss any of our future episodes. I bring you fresh content every week. Thanks for listening.